As the family of Jacob Blake holding a press conference in the wake of the police shooting that has left him paralyzed. We're going to continue to monitor that situation, and whatever breaks, we'll break in and let you know what happens. In the meantime, President Trump and the GOP getting ready for night 2 of the RNC. Last night, Republicans countering the doom and gloom message of the Democratic convention, focusing on policy and solutions ahead of tonight's Land of Opportunity theme.
Joe Biden and the Democrats are still blaming America first. Donald Trump has always put America first.
I've seen how deeply President Trump cares about rebuilding our evaporating middle class.
But a great education cannot be the exclusive right of the rich and powerful. It must be accessible to all. And that's why my dad is pro-school choice.
I learned that gun control laws didn't fail my daughter. People did.
They didn't give me the right to try experimental treatments, Mr. President. You did.
Their argument for Joe Biden boiled down to the fact that they think he's a nice guy. Well, let me tell you, raising taxes on 82% of Americans is not nice.
And a hot button issue right now across America taking center stage tonight. Republicans will make the case for law and order. All right, Katie Pavlich. We heard a lot of compelling and captivating, charismatic voices last night at the RNC. It's getting very good reviews. What was your assessment?
I just think that the RNC completely blew the accusations from the DNC last week and the ongoing accusations from the Biden campaign that President Trump and his administration and the Republican Party are not diverse, that they don't stand up for the little guy, that they don't stand up for the middle class, and of course that they're anti-immigrant. I mean, you had the speeches from Nikki Haley, of course, and Tim Scott, who completely blew everybody away with his own personal life story of going from picking cotton to Congress and talking about his grandfather not having an education and never learning to read, but then seeing him go to Congress and make a big difference in the world. He talked about his primary and how he beat out a number of other Republican opponents. I thought that was really compelling. But for me, the most compelling part of the entire night, I think, was the Cuban immigrant, Mr. Maximus, I believe is his last name, talking about the flirtation and the danger that we're seeing now on the left with socialism and communism, and his personal experience with that, and him saying, we are not going to give up what we have rightfully earned as a family. This is the last place that we're going to be. We are done abandoning that. There's nowhere else to go, and we will stand up for America and the freedom that has flourished here. So really that they hit back on a lot of the themes of the Democrats in terms of Republicans not being happy warriors, being divisive, being bullies, and being, you know, just a white party rather than having any kind of diversity.
Dana Perino, you covered the DNC extensively, staying up into all hours of the evening, watching all the speeches. This is night 1 of the RNC. How did it play for you?
Have you ever known me to stay up this late,
No.
this many nights in a row? I mean, it is really incredible. I thought that the RNC was just hitting three-pointers all night long. I think that works.
All right.
It was. Yeah. You remember that last week you had some people in the Republican Party sort of downplaying expectations for the production value because they only had about 4 weeks to plan, where the Democrats had about 4 months. And I got to tell you, I think the production quality of it was great. Like, you could watch that all night long, not be diverted in terms of your attention. It moved quickly. You think of all of those people that are not practiced politicians, that have never read off a teleprompter before they got prepared for this, and they nailed every one of those speeches. And they felt passionately about what they were talking about. Mr. Pollack there, of course, talking about his daughter Meadow was very compelling. I also really liked the segment, I guess it was kind of a show, but the meeting of the released hostages in the Oval Office with the president, because some of these things, some of these policies, like right to try, but also telehealth. Telehealth, is that big a deal? Telehealth actually polls so well all across America, but especially in rural areas, because that's where you need it the most. So I felt like they were just nailing it on policy, and I said last night you had more policy in the first hour of the Republican convention than you did in 4 days of the Democrats. Now, the other thing I would say in terms of what, just to pick up on something Katie said, people are talking about the suburbs as if they're just one monolith, like the suburbs. There's a lot of diversity in the suburbs. And there are things called exurbs, right? So those are the sort of more farther out from the cities, not quite rural America, but in between. There's a lot of middle-class people there. And I think that they were showing those people, look, we have a party here that can get things done. Remember that incumbents are very hard to beat. They have records to run on. So I think last night was absolutely amazing. It was also one other thing, and I'll shut up. The conventions are always the first primary speeches of the next election. And what you saw last night from Nikki Haley and Tim Scott, I think, were kind of their debut for potential runs in 2024. You'll also hear from Tom Cotton tonight, the senator from Arkansas. There's maybe a little bit more of that to come, but I think that the party is showing that they've got breadth and depth and diversity.
All right, Juan, I have a challenge for you. See if you can tell me your feelings about the RNC without using the word grievance, dark, and angry. Go ahead.
Well, you nailed it.
I knew it.
You said it for me.
Thank
you, Jesse. Jesse, you are accurate. You're exactly right. I agree with what you said, Jesse. Your word choice was just excellent. You knocked it out of the park. You hit 3-pointers. What else can I say, Dana? You know what?
Spike the volleyball.
Yes, you did that too. Way to go, Jesse. Touchdown. So, you know, I really had a different view than my colleagues because I thought it was a play totally to the base last night. You know, when I looked at it, I was expecting and hoping that, as advertised, it was going to be a counter to what had been described by the president as the gloomy Democratic convention. And I was looking for prescriptions, for ideas, for policies. Well, obviously, there's no platform except we back President Trump's Make America Great Again agenda. So forget that. But when it comes to looking at the speeches and even President Trump's speech for ideas, I just didn't see it. I saw what you saw, Jesse, about grievance, fear, name-calling. So for me, Trump's been the incumbent for 4 years. 4 years. He had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So I may have missed it, guys, but, you know, no fix on Obamacare or made health care better. He said that was going to happen quickly. It's going to be simple. No fix on immigration law. Nothing on immigration law. Forget that, except all that hooting and hollering about a fictional wall.
Well,
and only legislation.
Wall, Juan,
yeah, right. No, he repaired about 80% is just a repair job.
That's
Jesse.
not true.
And finally, okay, let me finish up. And only major legislation that this president passed in 4 years, talk about running on a record, was a tax cut for the richest 1%. So that's a pretty abysmal record, and no policy in terms of a second-term agenda, just zero.
Well,
except we're all Trumpian.
Not about prison reform. Also, to say that it was all about the base, he had multiple black Americans, former Democrats, a lot of reaching across the aisle. What did you think of it, Greg?
Well, first, I have an idea for a show. It's called the Post 5 Fact Check, where it's just 3 solid hours of fact-checking everything Juan just said, because that's how long it would take. The argument always about playing to the base. What's the base? Everybody gets away with saying he plays to the base, but they never define it, because when you get down to define it, it just turns out it's everybody who votes for him, people who generally want law and order, people who want normalcy, safety, they want to have good schools, they want to have low taxes. Everybody's in the base, I hate to tell you. But I saw a lot of powerful moments, and everybody pretty much hit on them. Tim Scott, Meadows' dad, Maximo Alvarez. The hostage segment was really interesting. And again, it was like a talk show. I also will throw Don Jr. in there, because it's always a compliment when you say, it's kind of a backhanded compliment when you say you're surprised by how well somebody did. But I was surprised because I thought it was well written. I thought it was well written, and I thought it was really well delivered. I felt like he found his voice, and I didn't see that coming. But I will say there was another criticism when you say they play to the base. What's the other way? They say, they're throwing red meat. It's a bunch of red meat. But I think at this point in 2020, America will prefer red meat over dead meat. We're watching riots and violence all over. Everything that the Democrats ignored and pretended didn't exist, swept under the rug, even though the governor of Wisconsin just declared an emergency, I guess, over something non-existent. So I think that if red meat is what the Republicans are delivering, that America is a carnivore and the Democrats are feeding tofu. So I think right now Trump has the upper hand because the Democrats gave it to him. By wimping out and being cowards about the violence and the horrible riots that are going on, and people storming restaurants and intimidating people into agreeing with them or else, and a guy protecting his charity gets beaten unconscious as he tries to put out a fire while this stuff is happening, and the Democrats aren't doing crap, and Joe Biden's hiding from actually making a statement about this. You know what? Trump's got it. He's going to have a landslide, and the Democrats are going to give it to him.
You heard it here first.
I think somebody got shot. I think somebody got shot in the back.
Predicted a landslide.
You know what I'm talking about, Juan.
All right.
Way to play to the base.
Ahead. RNC speakers eviscerate Joe Biden's record and warn what America could look like under his leadership.
Joe Biden under fire at the RNC last night. Speakers going hard after the Democratic nominee. They claim Biden will be easily pushed around by the far left, and they issued a dire warning. Watch this.
Joe Biden is basically the Loch Ness Monster of the swamp. For the past half-century, he's been lurking around in there. He sticks his head up every now and then to run for president. Then he disappears and doesn't do much in between.
A Biden-Harris administration would be much, much worse. Last time, Joe's boss was Obama. This time, it would be Pelosi, Sanders, and the squad. Their vision for America is socialism.
Greg, what we saw there from Don Jr. is he called Joe Biden a swamp creature. Oh, my gosh. And it seemed to me contradictory, so I thought I'd ask you to help. Because Joe Biden, according to the Republican talking point, spent 40 years in Washington, right? And during those 40 years, he's known to everybody as a political moderate. So how come all of a sudden he's a swamp creature?
You can be both. I mean, if you just go along to get along, if you're just doing it because you love to be there, you like the free meals, you like to shake hands, you like to feel important, you're a swamp monster. It's a very clever line. I think it was the winning line of the night, the Loch Ness Monster. But if you want the best defense or the best attack on leftism, you got to go to somebody who's had experience on the other end of it. And that was Maximo Alvarez, the Floridian who escaped Cuba. When he did say America, or his dad told him there is no other place to go, what he was trying to say is if leftism is allowed to take over America, then there will be no place, period, ever, for freedom. What if these riots and the arson and the class warfare became like a permanent thing? It's happening in Portland. They're into their, 90 days now? This isn't just something that's going away because of the militancy and the bureaucratic cowardice is combined to create this horrible gutting of the American dream. This is the most important message, I think, to get it from somebody who saw it up close in Cuba.
So, Jesse, let me pick up on what Greg's talking about, because to my ears, hearing a speaker at a major party convention compare Joe Biden to a communist dictator, I thought that was pretty disgusting. I just thought that was so wild. And again, we know Joe Biden. He's been around. He is a pro-American, moderate politician. So why would anybody think, oh, that's cute, or unless it's just name-calling?
Well, I think Joe Biden's left himself open to be attacked on street crime and socialism. And the Republicans last night shot that gap and just dropped a huge hand grenade there. Now it's a choice. It's not a referendum. There's a stark contrast between the president and Joe Biden, and they also made Joe Biden unlikable. He's not a nice guy, because nice guys don't let mobs and communists come in and destroy decades of hard work. There was a big dichotomy when they had Joe at the DNC sitting there getting bossed around by a Zoom wall of radicals. You juxtapose that to Donald Trump, who was there engaging and honoring frontline workers who'd made a lot of sacrifice. That was a big difference there. Also, Dana brought it up. The fact that President Trump has secured the release of 50 hostages in just 4 years from 20 different countries, very historic. If you don't have empathy, compassion, or strong character, you don't do that. Very skilled negotiator, and he was able to get that done. Andrew Pollock, whose daughter Meadow was killed because the Obama-Biden restorative justice policies didn't let school administrators red flag a clear killer. He made a great point about that and said Joe Biden didn't even know what year it happened. And then you had Parnell, Sean, who's a total stud, platoon leader, talk about he came from a family of Democrats, and the Democratic Party under Joe Biden has totally forgotten about regular working-class Americans who want to use their Second Amendment rights. The McCluskeys came on, eloquently described how they were trying to defend their home, yet they were charged, and the mob was not. And if Joe Biden comes, the mob takes over. Steve Scalise, shot by an actual socialist, made a very clear point. And I thought Don Jr.'s line about Beijing Biden, that's going to stick too. But I agree with everybody. The Cuban-American gentleman, when he said that he hears these echoes of fake promises about free health care and free education, and he knows what that means, and it sends a chill up his spine, and he knows that only in America can you control your own destiny? That was a very powerful message, and you're going to see the polls move in the battlegrounds after this week.
Well, I thought it was disgraceful. Let me go to you, Katie. Yeah. So, Katie, Nikki Haley,
communist Cuba.
No, if you want to start calling American politicians communists, I just think that takes you back to a different era, Jesse.
Let me go to Katie.
Let me just address that.
Katie, I just wanted to ask you about Nikki Haley. Let me just ask you a question about Nikki Haley. I'm not going to stop you from answering anything you want to answer. But I just think that Nikki Haley said, oh, wait a second, Biden's bosses will be Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, and the squad. Well, I thought to myself as a Democrat listening, wait a minute, Pelosi and the squad and Bernie Sanders, these people don't agree on everything. So what is she talking about?
This is actually a perfect segue from Maximo Olivares, who did compare what he is hearing in the United States now as a major party platform for the Democrats to the Communist Party in Cuba. Because you know who Joe Biden did a unified platform with? Bernie Sanders, who praised Fidel Castro as a humanitarian and said, well, he's done some bad things, but at least he has a reading program for his people. And last night, Mr. Alvarez laid out that he watched people who look exactly like him starve and die as a result of people like Fidel Castro and Bernie Sanders making all of these promises and taking all of the power for the elites at the top and leaving the people with nothing. And so, yes, there are conclusions to be drawn there when it comes to ideologies that have infiltrated the Democratic Party. And you can say, well, Joe Biden's the nominee. Well, it's very obvious when you sign a unified document with platforms about socialism in them, and you have major socialists speaking at your convention, that it is controlling major parts of the party and your agenda should you win the White House.
Dana, one last note here. The Republicans lifted up the McCluskeys yesterday as Second Amendment martyrs. Didn't they create a huge opening for Democrats who use their convention to speak about families that are worried about gun violence, about their children being victims of mass shootings?
Well, actually, no. I think that what the Republicans were doing and the McCluskeys are saying, you know, the law enforcement won't always be there to protect you. So sometimes you have to make a decision to protect yourself. One thing I want to say about the fact that now both parties are describing that there will be a dystopian future for America on November 4th, no matter who wins, right? So the Democrats did it all last week. I think that I think they actually said the country will end. Mm-hmm. Like, there will be no more United States of America if Donald Trump wins again. And now you see the Republicans saying this is what will happen if Biden wins. I think rhetoric has been ratcheted up across the board. You had Nancy Pelosi today saying that the Republicans were the enemies of the people in regards to mail-in voting. So the rhetoric, it gets hot when you get closer to an election. But I think that most voters strip that away and they think about what will my life be like under 4 years of this president or that candidate. And then that's how they make their choice. I don't think they worry too much about the highfalutin rhetoric.
All right, coming up, Senator Tim Scott with a big night at the RNC, making the case for Republicans and going after Joe Biden. Next to you on the phone.
Our family went from cotton to Congress in one lifetime. And that's why I believe the next American century can be better than the last.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott earning high praise for his RNC speech, which highlighted his own personal life story in an appeal to voters. Senator Scott also warning about what policies from a Biden-Harris administration could do to the country. Watch this.
Make no mistake, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want a cultural revolution, a fundamentally different America. If we let them, they will turn our country into a socialist utopia.
Greg, I want to ask you about the crafting of the speech. I thought the language was great. He used a little bit of humor when he made fun of himself a bit for failing civics and then realizing when he got to the Senate that several other senators seem to have failed civics as well. But also there was something that was not in the speech, and I thought it was interesting. So he talks about how his grandfather never learned to read or write. Scott's communications director, Sean Smith, tweeted this today, that when Tim Scott was a kid, his grandfather used to hold the newspaper at the breakfast table and pretend to read it so that they would get into the habit and know that that was really important to do. And he didn't know until he was an adult that his grandfather didn't know how to read.
Wow. A lot of people do that here.
Should we name names?
Yes. You know what the thing is, though? It does kind of show you that there's like two rough paths in life, and one is letting your adversaries define you or barrel through the adversity. And so you have this message, cotton to Congress, which is a necessary message when the media today and the Democrat Party's message is the opposite, which is, are you a minority in America? You're screwed. His is the opposite. He realizes that the defeatist mentality creates defeated people. That is what we're talking about almost every day now, is we're worried that this country is going in the wrong direction because there's this message that America doesn't serve millions and millions of people. And he is proof that that is not true. Same with Herschel Walker, by who we haven't met. Fantastic. But the idea that I think that he was saying was that, you know, things like racism may not be going away, but neither am I, which is a really important message for people to hear.
Juan, does Senator Tim Scott have some appeal to other black Americans that might not be Republicans now, but maybe on the fence?
Oh, sure. I think he appeals to me. I thought it was a very good speech last night. I think he personifies black aspiration and achievement. I mean, he's a United States senator. Incredible, historic, given that he's from South Carolina. But, Dana, I would say that the best of him, it was that his goal was to counter President Trump's problem with race in this country and his attitudes towards so many black people in this country. So he tried to help the president, I think, with two groups. White suburban women who were turned off by charges that the president is a racist, and most Americans at this point think that's true, according to the polls. And secondly, with black men, who are a group that, you know, he could see some support coming from that quarter. But you remember, Scott was highly critical of Trump when it came to find people on both sides in Charlotte. And also, Scott stopped a Trump judge who was nominated by Trump from taking the federal bench because he said that judge was unfair to black people in terms of voting rights.
Katie, isn't that part of Tim Scott's appeal, though, that he has been able to develop a relationship with the president where he can tell him what he thinks and keep that relationship strong enough that he can be effective?
Yeah, President Trump has a lot of respect for Tim Scott and vice versa. They've worked well together on criminal justice reform, on police reform, which the Democrats shut down, which he discussed last night. But Tim Scott's speech was incredible. He talked about how he's not into victimhood status, and his life shows that. And what I loved about what he had to say is he gave thanks and gratitude to the American people and the progress that they have made, and said the reason why I was able to be a congressman and ultimately a senator is because American voters judged me by my character and not by the color of my skin. And at a time when it seems like people are asking us to do the opposite of that, to see his success and his family story and the credit to his family for guiding him and pointing him in the right direction really is such an American success story that lots of people can emulate.
Speaking of his family, I talked to Trey Gowdy last night. He and Tim Scott are best friends. And Jesse, I said it was funny that, about the failing civics. And Trey Gowdy told me, well, Tim Scott's mother still does not think that's funny. So I thought of your mom.
Yes. I did not fail civics. But Trey's best friends with Senator Scott? Aren't they a little too old to be best friends? That's a little strange. But anyway, I'll let that pass. No, the president is aggressively courting the black vote, and he's doing it through policies, not pandering, unlike the Democrats. I liked when Tim Scott said that he had a deal with the Democrats on police, but they backed away because they didn't want to solve the problem. They wanted to keep the issue alive for the election. Also, Vernon Jones, black Democrat, state of Georgia, talked about how the Democrats wear the little Kunta Kinte cloth, but they take the votes for granted. He said black Americans don't want to defund the police. And that's a big lie. Also, Herschel Walker, the point where he said, Donald Trump and I are very similar. When we see an obstacle, whether it's either in the political realm or on the football field, we run over it. And that may be kind of a bruising style for a lot of people, but it's effective.
All right. Greg takes on media reaction to the RNC. That's next on The Five.
Turn on those sad songs.
So 9 progressive groups have joined together to help stop the rioting that's destroying our cities. I lie. They're petitioning to tape delay the convention in order to fact-check the speakers, because those are all lies. CNN called it a parade of lies. As the leading fake news network, I guess they were frightened of the competition. So here's their biggest lie.
We had multiple speakers from Congressman Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan tout economic records that have been obliterated by the pandemic. They cited the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. Well, we don't have that anymore. We're now at 10.2%, higher than at any time since the Great Recession.
Really? Really? Yeah, well, for that to be a lie, you must be an idiot, for you assume America can't factor the shutdown's effects on the numbers. But then again, it is CNN. Fact is, those were amazing numbers before the shutdown, and even Trump's usual critics know that disputing them is too stupid a path to take. But not that bozo. The reality, the Trump economy was so powerful, it's still withstanding a hurricane disguised as a disease. Other lies fall into the usual muddy area of opinion. There's one about Trump downplaying the pandemic. This after noting the devastating impact on jobs from the shutdown that Trump initiated. That's some downplaying. Shutting down travel, the economy, getting ventilators to those who claimed were needed. And Trump did this without killing people in rest homes. Maybe he should write a book about it. Include pictures so Andrew Cuomo can understand it. Of course, they ignore the Dems and even experts who really downplayed it. And you can find those pretty easy.
Our biggest concern to you at home right now, today, is influenza. It's not coronavirus.
Sanjay, you were telling us the last hour that there's an important context we need to keep this in, and that is that the flu is more deadly.
Yeah.
How worried should Americans be about coronavirus?
Coronavirus is not going to cause a major issue in the United States.
Half of the people in America do not get a flu shot, and the flu right now is far deadlier. So if you're freaked out at all about the coronavirus, you should be more concerned about the flu.
Who's downplaying what? Honest mistakes, because they were preoccupied. I still wonder how this pandemic would look now if the government hadn't been hijacked by phony collusion myths and a full-blown impeachment. Lives would have been saved, many lives. But knowing the Dems, they'd blame Trump for overpopulating the planet. So, Katie, it's amazing when these fact-checkers suddenly wake up for the Republicans.
Yeah, this Daniel Dale, who you had on after the DNC, he was like, oh, there's just not that much to do. There's just not that much fact-checking to do. You know, fact-checkers are just liberal reporters with a different title. They pretend that they are arbiters of the truth, that they are fair, that they're looking at both sides of an issue. But when you look at what they're actually fact-checking, it's very clear that they're no different than the other 93% of reporters that identify on the left.
You know, Jesse, when they fact check, they always tend to put a spin on it. It's like when the Republican says they sent a pallet of cash to Iran, the fact checker says, no, they didn't. They sent a pallet of cash to Iran. But it was meant for something else and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, we'll just take the first part of the sentence. Thank you very much.
Right. They're just like the DNC rapid response. I predict the fact checker's going to probably have a job in a Democratic political campaign because CNN probably isn't paying him that well. I love, to Dana's point earlier, you have the Republicans who have their convention and they say marauding mobs of socialists are going to destroy your family and your business. And then you have the DNC saying Donald Trump will destroy democracy, pile up black bodies, and give you COVID-19. And the media says the Democrats are uplifting and unifying and the Republicans are dark. They're saying the exact same thing. And the fact that Jesse Waters, has the intellectual honesty to say that both parties paint dire pictures of the other party if they're in charge, and CNN doesn't, tells you a lot.
Juan, do you agree with Jesse that he's being honest?
No.
Intellectually honest.
You know what strikes me is facts are stubborn things. They're real facts.
Yeah. Did you invent that phrase?
When do you hear the Trump people say, oh, yeah, he's done a great job with the coronavirus, you think, oh, did they miss 170,000 Americans?
I know.
dead?
He killed those people, Juan.
So
he killed those people. How dare he kill those people?
That's a fact. And another fact is, guess what? When he says,
is the number,
oh, you know,
not how he handled it.
You know, oh,
we expected
the
2 million.
economy has been great under Trump.
2 million,
Trump promised 4% GDP growth. Never achieved under Trump. Never.
That's a lie.
So again,
it's a promise.
That's a fact. That's a fact to live with. I mean, and similarly, you know, when you point out failures like that, that's very hard. And yet somehow you guys want to excuse it as just, oh, well, what's the difference? But facts are facts.
I missed your facts. Dana? Just the facts.
I think that last week the fact checkers got the week off. But that was okay because you can't fact check emotions. Right?
Ooh, yep.
There was one thing last week that the AP last week did fact-check Michelle Obama's speech when she talked about putting kids in cages. And they said, wait, hold on a second. That whole policy, the cages were built, like that was under the Obama administration. So I did see that one fact check. But I did notice that they fact-checked Nikki Haley for calling Biden's public option government-run health care. But if you remember, when Obamacare was being passed, Democrats openly campaigned on this being the step to get to Medicare for all. So I don't think that fact check needed to be done.
Also, a fact check was when they said if we did nothing against the coronavirus, we could see between 1.5 and 2 million deaths. And that, if we had actually done something, it could be anywhere from 150,000 to 250,000. That was in the data. Next up, Melania Trump getting ready for her big speech tonight. Will she get the same media treatment as Jill Biden?
First Lady Melania Trump set to take center stage at the RNC tonight, delivering her speech from the newly renovated Rose Garden. Will she get the same praise from the media that was lavished on Jill Biden and Michelle Obama? So, Dana, you had Stephanie Grisham on your show earlier today to give a preview. Want to remind us about what she said?
Sure. I think that, she did say that the First Lady is going to make some reference to what she might like to do in a second term, which I think will be interesting to find out. She obviously loves children, and she glows around them in any capacity. So maybe it will have to do with that. We'll have to wait and see. I do think that Jill Biden, on the merits, got praised for her speech, and I think that Melania Trump will as well. These are reticent speakers. They don't seek the limelight. They don't give a lot of speeches. They hate politics. But they are the best character witnesses for their husbands, and I think that's why people will want to tune in tonight. Especially, you have the the Rose Garden tonight, and it is newly updated, and everybody will enjoy it, I am sure.
Greg, given the media's coverage of the Rose Garden renovation over the past week, my expectations for how they will behave is very low.
You should keep them very low, because if you want to see a peculiar brand of misogyny exercised by feminists, you got to go to Twitter, because that's where you're going to see the ugliness unfold. But I'm looking forward to Nick Sandmann, and I'll tell you why. I'm hoping Nick Sandmann shows up in a Ferrari, just covered in bling and fur, and it's all paid for by CNN and Jeff Zucker, who I wonder if they're actually going to carry Nick Sandmann as he just kind of basically does a victory lap around the media. I hope so.
With all of his chains. Okay, Juan, don't you think as a journalist that Melania Trump deserves the same fair treatment as Joe Biden did?
Yeah, but fair, we're talking a little bit too quickly here, Katie, because he hasn't given the speech yet, so we don't know. I mean, I think they should be fair to everybody.
You can treat someone fairly, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, last time, Fair was pointing out, hey, that sounds like Michelle Obama's speech. So this time, I'm interested to hear her because I want to hear what she says about be best and bullying, given her husband's behavior online, which is often described in just those terms. I mean, you ask Greta Thunberg about it, and I think most people would say that's bullying a little kid.
What? She got
okay.
She got the Peace Prize.
She got the Peace Prize?
I mean, she's not just a little kid. I mean, she's like the most feted person in the world.
I know. She's a victim. Dana, she's a victim. Come on.
His online behavior towards that kid, that's not good.
It's terrible.
Have you seen her speeches?
It's terrible.
Terrible. I agree. Thank you.
She's very good at lecturing the rest of the world, that's for sure, and kind of shaming them
well, it's tough
about
to
what
run
their
a Be
actions
Best
are.
campaign.
So.
You know, how are you going to run Be Best?
That's such an old talking point, please.
Yeah, yeah.
I love
Jesse.
I love how Juan Williams, you know, Melania's speechwriter borrows one line from Michelle Obama. Joe Biden plagiarized his entire career. Juan hasn't mentioned that once. But like Greg, I'm looking forward to Nick Sandmann because, in a way, Nick Sandmann is the silent majority. He literally was silent in the face of verbal abuse, physical intimidation, and this just sinister band of social media predators that try to destroy his life. But he had the last laugh, just as Trump supporters will have the last laugh in November.
Well, maybe Nick Sandmann will show up with a diamond-encrusted MAGA hat, Greg, just to show off a little bit.
I'll lend him mine.
All right, one more thing. One more thing up next.
It's time now for one more thing, Dana.
I want to tell you about a really great kid named Dallin Hayden. He is playing this season. He's a football player, and he's playing for Coaches for Literacy. That's a charity that helps kids learn to read. So he started this campaign to raise money for the organization based on every touchdown he scores this year. As of right now, he has raised nearly $6,000 at the current rate. Another $600 will be donated for each touchdown he scores. He wants to hit a goal of $12,000 by the end of the season. He said he struggled with reading and writing while growing up, and that it made it hard for him to learn in the classroom. So he wants to make sure every kid has the opportunity to learn. You can visit his page at pledgeit.org/Dallin-Hayden to see how you can help out. And those of you who know football, like I do, his father played 5 years in the NFL, Aaron Hayden.
All right. I'm sure you have his jersey, Dana. Juan, you're up.
Okie doke. So time for a little summer fun. How about a video game superstar, the Mario Brothers, come to life in New York City? Yes, take a look at this.
Hey,
they went by New York City's iconic sites, Times Square, Washington Square Park. The video game crew even threw a banana in front of the guy taking the lead, just like they do in the game. Caleb Simpson and Irvin Salazar got the cars from Amazon. Then they had to put smaller engines in to slow the cars down. They didn't want trouble with the police. But instead of trouble, they got waves of applause and laughter from everyone who recognized summer's fun in the city.
Cute.
That's pretty funny. I'm sure Greg has a big problem with it, but I think it's funny. Katie.
That's
what if you run over him?
Car.
Exactly.
What if you run over him?
Exactly.
Then you're arrested for manslaughter, and then there's a riot.
Katie.
All true things that could happen. Okay, so this is an awesome cake that was made by Graceful Cake Creations in Mesa, Arizona. I love it because it has edible shotgun shells. The bride is carrying her groom with a rifle saying the hunt is over. There's a deer and leaves, and it's made of, it looks like a tree trunk, and I just think it's awesome. But of course, leave it to the internet to try and shame it. It was posted under wedding shaming on Reddit, and they were saying, oh, well, it looks like she killed the guy. This is cruelty to animals.
It kind of does.
It's weird, but but I love it. I think it's great. So kudos to Graceful Cake Creations for making this hunting-themed wedding cake.
A shotgun wedding cake.
Yes.
There it is. Greg.
Did it taste gamey?
Yes. Probably.
Greg, you have 30 seconds.
I'll just sit here and stare into space. I think that would probably be best for me right now, just to stare into space until Brett gets his jacket and his tie on. I think he's out in the lobby having a drink. He's probably trying to get back into his seat right now.
Okay.
He's almost there.
Fox News hosts do not drink before broadcast. I want to make that very clear.
Only 50%.
Special coverage of the Republican National Convention begins right now on said special report. Hey, Brett.
Only on Fridays, Jesse. Staring into space.